Greetings and salutations, my friends, and welcome to a new video. We have got a bit of a different background going today. I feel like we rarely use this backdrop because this is mostly backlit because there's a window behind this bookshelf right here and there's a window right next to that. So it's just like a very inconvenient setup, despite I think being very cozy because we are surrounded by books. However, it's been raining for like the better part of the last 3 to 4 hours. It's been very gloomy today, loads of thunder, and I just feel like this type of weather calls for loads of rest, cozy up, and relaxation. And so I figured what best way to film today than to sit down surrounded by books and talk about you guys' weird reading habits. Now I know that sounds very hyper specific, but I asked you a few weeks back on Instagram. I put up a little question box for you to drop all of your weird reading habits. These could be just about anything, and I would react to them on camera, tell you my thoughts and opinions if I do it too, if there is any overlap in our weird reading habits, because I am sure there are a plenty. I think that's what's so cool about reading, right, is the fact that it's different for everybody. Everybody will consume books differently, have different opinions, have their own set of specific routines in place in order to really absorb what they are reading. Like I know for me, I cannot listen to any music with lyrics on it because I'll hyper focus on the music and I will not be able to read. And I'm very excited to see what you guys are going to be. So I've got my trusty phone here with me. Let us go through a bunch of them and see what you guys' reading habits are. Because of what I was discussing in the intro, I feel like this is a perfect one to start with. I can't read without ambient sounds in the background. I think it mostly depends on the day because there are days that even with noise, I cannot concentrate. So there will be days where the fireplace is a little bit too overstimulating. There will be days where the music is something that I'll hyperfix on just a little bit stronger than the book, or even times where the music will be distracting and my brain just doesn't seem to engage. So I feel like it depends on the day for me. But for the most part, I have like a curated set of playlists and sounds and noises that tend to really make the perfect setup for me to read. So I know a few of my favorite ones and I will leave them linked down below in case you guys want to check them out. But I've got a few playlists and also YouTube like song compilations that I listen to on rotation when I am reading very specific books. So I know for me, there's this very specific Brandon Sanderson playlist on YouTube that I listen to all the time that's I think specifically catered toward the Stormlight Archive or the Way of Kings, but I think it works perfectly for high fantasy. There's another one that's like a dark fantasy. It is literally so good for those darker aesthetic fantasies that seem to be more gothic. I just think it sets the mood so well. I mean, the Game of Thrones score is just perfect. I have that constantly on repeat and in shuffle. There's another one that's a dark piano that I listen to a lot, and I find that that works perfect for classics or again for those darker in-tone books. I feel like it conditions the brain just perfectly and just the right amount for you to really get into the aesthetic of it all. Also, Lo-Fi Girl I think is amazing for when I'm reading maybe literary fiction, or if I'm reading a romance, I feel like that can also set the mood quite well. There's another playlist on Spotify that is all about film scores. That's another one that I really love. And then last but not least, it's a single album. It's like so specific, but the Batman score by Michael Giacchino. I know it's so very specific. He literally made it into my 2023 most listened because I just kept this thing on repeat as I was reading. And again, for fantasy, it just sets the mood so very well. So the Batman score, the newest one, was just chef's kiss for me. And I think that's what I gravitate the most when I am reading, is just like a really good score that'll really amp up the scenes for me, make them feel more tense. And I think for me specifically, as somebody who can visualize quite well what is happening in the book, I think scores make it seem so much more real, and it definitely makes it seem more like visual media, which makes the reading experience so freaking fun. I just think ambient sounds, but also scores and just music in general can liven up the experience so freaking much, and it can definitely make it seem more of a movie, TV show that's playing in your head, and I love the feeling so very much. I cannot start a series until I have all the books. See, I feel like a few years ago, I definitely would have agreed. These days, I think I'm much better at buying the first book, trying it out, seeing if I like it, and then buying the rest of the series. I found that by buying complete series, I would just not read them at all. I found that there was not as much excitement for me personally in having all of the books on my shelves because I was just like, oh, they're gonna be there, they'll stay there, I can just pick them up whenever I want and it's not a problem. Whereas when I read a series and I only own the first book, if it goes really well for me, by the time I'm done with the first book, I'm like rushing to buy the second one so that when that gets here, I can put it in the following month's TBR. And I think it makes it so much more exciting. And also, if I don't enjoy the first book in a series, because I'm very specific with my series, I'm not the type of person that I will read the first book. If I really don't enjoy it and I gave it like 1 star, or if I DNF'd it or what have you, I am not the type of person that if I did did not enjoy the first book, let's say that I gave it 1 or 2 stars, I don't typically tend to be curious enough to go into the second book or the third book to kind of, you know, fuck around and find out if it's gonna be good or if it gets better through time. So I find that having complete series can often backfire for me specifically just because of the type of reader I am. And so I find that buying them as I read them is probably the best experience I have gotten thus far versus just owning the whole thing. There are certain series in which I own all of the books, but more likely than not, that means that I bought the entire series because either the prints I had were going out of circulation, so publishing was withdrawing these specific editions, or they are harder to find, and so I just got overexcited and I got the entire series so that I could say that I had all of them and then I didn't have to worry about mix and matched copies. And honestly, I have very few of those. I think I've gotten quite good at just buying the first book and then figuring out whether I want to continue or not. But I think you're not the only one. Sound off in the comments if you're the type of person too that you just need the entire series so that you can binge it all. Sometimes I like to read the last page of the book right before starting it. I have told this story countless times. I used to do this too, up until I spoiled myself and I learned due to the harsh experience of spoilers to never do that again. But I'm not gonna lie, there are times right before starting a book where I'm like, ooh, I wonder what the last line is. And then I go in and I read it and I'm like, oh wait, how did we get there? And I do think sometimes it makes the journey so much more exciting because you read the very last bit or even you read the last page and you're like, wait, how did we get to this point? What sequence of events leads us to this crazy thing happening or this plot twist being revealed? I don't do it so often though because I learned my experience. What I used to do, let me tell you, come closer. What I used to do is that I used to go to the bookstore and I'd buy books based on the very last page. So I'd either read the last line or I'd read the last page entirely. And I learned the hard way because of Lady Midnight by Miss Cassandra Clare that I should not be doing that because I completely destroyed the first book and the experience because I completely just spoiled myself in that ending. And I learned ever since to not do that. And so I try not to. But guys, I'm not gonna lie, there are times where I pick up that damn book and I'm like, how does it end? How does it end? Because I want to find out. And then I regret it sometimes. But most of the times I don't because sometimes it's very ambiguous, especially if it's a series. I get it, been there, done that, still do it sometimes. I only buy books I have already read and only if I enjoyed them. I hate reading physical books. And honestly, I love this. I love this a lot. I don't find this weird at all. In fact, I think it's a really smart way to spend your money because you never really know if you're going to enjoy a book. You end up buying it and then if you don't like it or if you DNF it or if you lose interest over time, if you've got a big TBR, physical TBR at that like myself. And I find myself wishing these days so much that I'd have a reduced TBR to the point where it'd be easier to get through and where I could just buy books as I read them or buy books as I enjoy them because this can be quite overwhelming. And so I think beyond the sentiment of I just don't like reading physical books, I think it's just a smart way to be a consumer, honestly, because that way you know that what you do have are things that you do enjoy and that you'll probably cherish for a really long time. So I honestly love that and I wish that that were my case. Evidently it's not, but I think if I had any ideal scenario, it would probably be to have a smaller physical TBR because it'd make this whole thing just probably a lot easier. I have to use the same bookmark for an entire series. Bonus points if it is personalized. I heavily agree on this. I feel like I have to choose the perfect bookmark for the book. I feel like it's gotta be the right aesthetic, it's gotta be the right character, it's gotta be the right color, it's gotta be just the overall energy of the bookmark. It's such a weird thing to do, but because I have built over time quite a vast collection of bookmarks, I feel like I can cater it to the book quite well. And from character cards or tarot cards that I have from different books and characters that I got in book boxes, all the way to things I have gotten with specific books that are for that specific book, or just overall bookmarks that I think fit the aesthetic of specific books very perfectly. I have to browse through them all to kind of match it to the book. I hope that makes sense. Don't know if it's that weird though, or maybe it is. Maybe it's like too specific. Maybe it's like, Mel, you're trying too hard. Let a girl know in the comments. I need to alternate between different books to really maintain my attention. And I used to be that way where I could read like a million books at once and not be distracted and I'd plow through all of them. I find that these days it's the complete opposite. If I start a book, I typically need to stick to it in order to finish it. Because if I get distracted by the next book, it's likely that I'll leave that book with the bookmark in for months in either my TBR cart or in the shelves themselves. There are countless of books sitting here that I have actually started. Bookmarks are still in, and that happened because I got distracted by the next new shiny toy and I'd never finished that book and I never went back to it. And I find that my attention diverts quite strongly. So I feel like I'm the opposite of this. I feel like I have to finish the book I'm currently currently reading, or if I'm reading something physically and on audio, then that works out quite nicely because it's just two different formats. See, I feel like this is very specific. Reading the dialogue first, then going back and reading the whole page normally. I don't know that I've heard this before. And see, this is the beautiful thing about books and reading, is that the experience will be so unique and personal to everybody, that everybody has got like their own way of going about soaking in the information, that it makes the reading experience so unique and, again, personalized. And I love this. I don't know that I've ever found myself doing this, but what I will do though, now that we're speaking of dialogue, is that sometimes I'll just like get really into it and I'll just read it out loud and I'm like, oh, that was good. And I'll just like get into character and everything. Listen, it's like a whole thing. I find myself doing that also when I'm like really getting into it and I'm like flying through the page and I'm like, no, let's soak it in. Let us read the dialogue. Let us read the monologue. And I find myself like really getting sucked in even more. But as far as reading the dialogue first, that's probably really smart because you really are soaking it all in. So I love that. See, now I feel like we're getting to the weird ones because why did somebody say, picking a book off my TBR by its smell? If my girl if my girl good, she coming to this with me? Guys, I don't know that I've ever heard this. That, I'm not gonna lie, that's a little bit wild. Like, I can't imagine just going, this one smells good. Like, to me, it doesn't like really smell like anything. It doesn't, I feel like maybe, I don't know what conditions we're in, but I feel like for me, my books don't really smell like much unless they're like really, really old and then they start like crusting up and they start like acquiring that humid sort of smell. I feel like that's another story altogether, but otherwise, never done this. I think this will be one of the ones that I brand just a little bit weird. I read the synopsis after finishing the book. They have spoilers, pick reads based on vibes and recs, and honestly, that's so good. I find that when I go into the book knowing too much about it, whether it's that I read an entire synopsis or that I heard people talk very specific things about the book and either hating on the characters or loving on the characters, it builds a certain kind of expectation, whether it's a really high one or a really low one, and going into books without any set of expectations or prior knowledge, I find that bodes better for me, specifically because I find that I can get swayed either way, and so I feel like it's quite good to not go into the book knowing all of these things. And I have peeped that about synopses being way too spoilery and mentioning things that don't happen, not even in the first half of the book. And I find that incredibly frustrating because I understand that they do that because they need a hook, they need something to really catch the audience's attention. However, I literally read Where Sleeping Girls Lie not too long ago, a few weeks ago, and I found myself wondering when this one part of the synopsis would come about because it's mentioned quite early on in the synopsis and it doesn't happen until the last 100 or so pages. And I just found that preposterous because if you're throwing in third act conflict / third act plot twists into the synopses, then it's ruining the experience. It should be more of a surprise, and you don't have to say, oh, this specific thing happened. You can say, and as the character dove deeper into the mystery, they'll find out the truth about their family and their life will change forever. You can go about it in so many different ways that I don't find putting these things in are wholly necessary. So I know for me, when I do read a synopsis, just to kind of gauge how interested I am, or if it's something that I know I'll kind of mesh well with, I'll either just read the first paragraph or the first 2 sentences or even just the tagline. I've got a very specific limit on what I read because a lot of the time the entirety of the synopsis is just not necessary. Like, literally, look at this. It's 4 whole paragraphs. We don't need this much. Just give me one, just give me the tagline and just give me a brief little, ooh, this is what's happening in the book. Don't give me 4 paragraphs. I think especially for sequels, it's really not needed at all. I am fine without that, baby. Owning over 151 books and still reading ebooks because I'm a mood reader. I get this a lot. I own, as you guys know, a lot of books physically. There's around 800 books in this household, which I know is excessive. Thankfully, most of these books are read, but there's still a huge chunk of these books that are not read. And that's not even counting the sequels for the first installments that I have got here. So if we count those, even if I do end up enjoying the series, it can get quite extensive. And despite me owning so many books physically, I still find myself getting more books. And I have to be candid and I have to be honest. It really is the fact that after owning things for so long, there are books that have resided in these shelves for 4 years unread. There are things that don't really call my attention anymore. There are things that don't seem as striking as when I first got them or received them. And so because there are newer releases incoming, or books that I have heard so many amazing things about recently, or books that have been recently recommended to me by friends or family, I find find myself wanting to get those and read those and prioritize them just because it is something that is more current or something that better aligns with where my reading tastes are at the moment. And I find myself getting new books or newer books because of that. And I am not gonna lie, it's part of the reason why I want to go through my shelves very soon and just unhaul a bunch of the books that I know realistically after so many years I'm not going to read, or books that once more I've DNF'd, not like, I don't need them on my shelf. Even if I've got repeated copies, things that I can just get rid of because they don't need to be here. Just so many different things where I go, yes, I can go through the shelves and purge them of all the things that I know I'm not going to read anymore because I know I'm a mood reader. And although I make a TBR, that TBR is catered to the specific mood I'm in when I'm making that TBR. And if I haven't been in the mood for something in 4 years, maybe it's time to let that baby go. You know what I mean? And so I get it, because I definitely find myself buying new books because they more align with where I'm at instead of the things that I already own. It's quite bad. I know there's a lot to talk about and break down with that. I always need the aesthetic of the book to convince me to read and start a book. And I feel this though, because specifically when there are very popular books, I find myself going on TikTok or going on Reels to look for the aesthetic of the book and see if it's something that I'm interested in, see if it's something that I would vibe with just based on vibes and aesthetic. But moreover, when I find myself really looking for aesthetics, it's gonna sound so hyper specific and maybe also just a little bit weird. I don't know if you guys find yourselves doing the same thing, but when I am reading a book and it's quite slow and I find myself kind of struggling through the book because of its pace, I go look for aesthetic boards on Pinterest, TikTok, Reels, wherever, so that I can convince myself to push through the rest of the book, especially if it's a case where the book is written well, the story is good, and the only thing making me slog through it is the fact that the book is slower. And that's when I think aesthetic boards and aesthetic videos and stuff come really handy for me. It's really to just make me plow through the rest of the story because it's massive helps, honestly, to reconnect just with the visual of it so that I can then go back into the book and enjoy it. And it works every time. I am glad I'm not the only one. I mentioned this earlier. Acting out the dialogue part out loud. I do this so freaking much. Maybe it's my audiobook narrator frustrated dream. Maybe it's the past actress in me. And of course, with me listening to a score in the background and having very specific music, it seems like I'm just right there and it's like a vivid thing that's happening and it's so good. Glad to know I'm not the only one because I feel kind of weird when I do it, and I never do it on camera, nor do I do it on screen, because I always find myself feeling just a little bit too just like, oh, maybe this is like a really weird thing that I do, of me just going, the king entered the hall and said, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's so specific. I only start a book if I know I can read for hours, and I'm the same way. I will never start a book if I know I'm only going to be able to get 5 pages into it. I am very specific in that when I sit down to read and I'm starting a new book, I want to make sure that I'm getting 50, 100 pages in to really soak in the beginning of the book, because otherwise just breaking it into smaller increments is not gonna work out for me that well. And that's probably because I hyperfixate and I read books in like 3 sittings or 2 sittings or even a single sitting, and so I find myself wanting to read for longer periods of time. And then also when I know that I can't concentrate, I will not start a book, nor will I read either, or force myself to get through a book, because that does impact my enjoyment of it. So I know that for me, I have to kind of make the space where I know I can sit down and read for 2 hours. I can sit down and read for an hour, and I know that way I can get through a bigger chunk of the first third of the book, and it makes the experience so much better for me personally, just because that's the way that I really get into the story. But smaller increments, I don't think I could ever do. I love that Darian said, I don't think it's weird, but I keep the dust jackets on while I read. I don't think this is weird necessarily. I do it only when I'm filming though, because I'm like, ooh, look at the cover, it's pretty, and then I'm reading with the dust jacket on, but otherwise I don't. But it's because I know myself. I know I'm not careful. And also with cats around, the cats are constantly biting books, scent marking books. I need to make sure that no dust jackets get damaged in the making of anything. And so that's why I take the dust jackets off, because I don't want them bent or broken, because I have a bad track record of breaking and bending books all the time. I'm not shy about breaking spines, and I would honestly prefer to not damage covers or dust jackets, but I do. The amount of times I have grabbed a little paperback and I have bent that bitch over, okay, it's bad. And so I want to take care of my dust jackets, which is why I take them off, because I know I'm not the most careful. But if I was, I'd probably keep the dust jacket on because the book looks pretty. I love this one. Doing anything but reading. And honestly, find myself doing that too, especially when there's like a lot of work. I'm like, oh my God, I have to sit down and read, or I want to sit down and read. And then I sit down to read after a really long work day and I just fall asleep. Or if I'm in the mood to read and I want to read and then I get distracted. But that's on the ADHD though, because I just get distracted by other things I need to get done. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I want to read today. I'm gonna carve out a good little spot. And then I end up doing the dishes. I put on a load of laundry. I make my bed. I remember that I have got to get something done in the computer and I'm like, oh, let me get the work done. By the time I'm looking at the clock, it's 11 p.m. and I'm like, oh, when am I gonna read now? Let's just go to bed. And so sometimes, honestly, I think it's an accurate statement where I just want to read and then I don't. Next up, we have got shifting through the pages while reading, kind of like when you were counting pages. See, I don't know if this is just like touching the pages and just kind of touching each page individually as a sensory thing before you move on to the next page, or if it's actually like, oh, I'm counting pages to see how many pages I have got before the chapter's over. Because if it's counting pages to see how many pages you have got until the next one, I do that all the time. Especially with books that I know have got longer chapters. Literally Two Twisted Crowns, I was like, baby, what the heck? These chapters are long sometimes. Some of them were short, some of them were long. But when it was long, I was like, oh my God, this is like 10 pages. This is like 15 pages. When is the chapter gonna be over? And I really just do that to see how many more chapters I can read before I close out the book. Because honestly, if the chapter is 20 pages long, it's 10:30. I'm finishing this one and going to bed. But if the book has shorter chapters, which is typically with romance books, if it's shorter chapters and the chapters are like 2 pages, 3 pages, oh baby, I'll stay up till 3 a.m. to finish that motherfucker. I don't know how that makes sense because it equals to about the same amount of pages. There is just something about a short chapter that will propel me to the next one and then the next one. And you just keep telling yourself, one more, one more, one more. And then you just get to the end of the book and it's 3 a.m. and you're like, damn, and I have to be up at 6. And I honestly love it. It's quite cool. I love that this is like a massive tangent because I don't even know if this is what the person does. But either way, yes, I can only motivate myself to read by watching a booktube video while I am reading. And I know you're not the only one. I know you're not alone in this. There's a bunch of people in here that said I can't read without having anything in the background. Like I just need several things happening at the same time for me to kind of sit down and read and focus. I am the complete opposite, where in theory, I would love to have a booktube video in the background or some sort of video in the background to kind of keep me company. I get so distracted. I can't do it. It's the same logic for me specifically as when I listen to music with lyrics. I just hyper focus on one thing and not the other, and it's very, very distracting, and I just can't find myself kind of tuning everything out, which is so funny because I always used to be able to do this. I used to live in a very loud household. Everybody was always talking or fighting or screaming or doing something, and I used to be so good at being able to sit down and tune everything out. And I don't know if it's now that I live by myself and there's like so much quietness and silence, which I love my silence. I don't know if I've just grown so used to a space where there is virtually no noise. And now that I've got cats and they're vocal, yes, when they want to, but most of the time they're just quiet. I don't know if it's maybe that has conditioned me to only be able to read when I'm like in a very curated element and space. But now I can't even watch a booktube video in the background, whereas I used to be able to. And I honestly envy y'all. I really, really do. Like, I wish I could because it sounds so freaking cozy and amazing. Somebody literally said, me right now in the emergency room with a book that I know I won't read because pain. Why is that me? I don't know if this is specifically what this one is referring to, but I'll just make assumptions, okay? It's my channel, we can do it. Hello, what's up? Welcome. I find myself taking a book with me everywhere. It could be a restaurant, it could be even to the movie theater. Like, why am I taking a book to the movie theater? When I'm going out with family where I know the conversation's gonna be flowing quite nicely on the table, and when I go to my mom's house or when I go to my aunt's house or when I'm hanging out with friends, I always have a book with me in my tote bag, in my purse, because I don't know when I'm gonna need that reprieve. And I take books with me everywhere, despite knowing that most of the time I'm not going to pick it up. But you never know when the need is going to arise. It's like an umbrella. You don't know if it's going to rain today, or you know it's not gonna rain today, but you never really know when the tides are going to change. You never really know when the sky is gonna be like, surprise motherfucker, it's raining now. And I just know that having a book I just know that having a book with me is probably going to be the best call, because you never really know when you're going to be left stranded somewhere and you're like, oh well, at least I got a book with me. So I don't know if this is what it's referring to, but literally though, literally take a book with me to every freaking doctor's appointment. Ask me if I read something. Fuck no, because I'm either 1, in pain, or 2, anxious about the damn doctor's appointment, but I got the book with me, baby. Much like the one with having something in the background and also the music one, which I feel has been repeated a lot, I also see this one a lot of just being comfortable when I'm reading, removing my my socks, having a hoodie when reading or I feel uncomfortable and I can't concentrate, having my mouth and nose covered by a blanket or my shirt, having a blanket in like a very specific position. I see like so many that have got to do with just the attire and how to dress, how comfy to be. And I agree with this all. I do have to say with the socks one, maybe a little bit of a disagree, but it's because this body, this chronically ill body has got temperature regulation issues. And so a lot of the time my feet will be very, very cold. And so I just put the socks on just to regulate the temperature just a little bit more. But I do agree that I've got to be very cozy, whether it's that I'm wearing a t-shirt, I'll compensate the lack of hoodie or sweatshirt with a blanket, or I'll use a hoodie or a sweatshirt instead of a blanket. But I do have to be very, very comfy, very, very cozy when I'm sitting down to read, because like we were mentioning earlier, I know for me reading is not going to be like a 20-minute endeavor. It's not going to be an hour-long endeavor. It's probably going to be longer than that, and I carve out these very specific spaces, so may as well take a shower, get dressed really comfy, and then sit down and read, which is typically what I do. I know a lot of the time my reading will take place in the late afternoon / night when I am done with work, so at that point in time, after the whole day has gone by, second shower is ensuing, we're putting on comfies, we're going to the couch, and then we're sitting there for like 2 to 3 hours just sitting and reading, and it's a great time. And sometimes that'll be accompanied by a tea or coffee or some cozy drink, sometimes just the water, but there's definitely like very specific, I think, attire to it all. I love that even the witchy has entered the chat. If a book upsets me, I put it in a Ziploc bag and then into the freezer. See, I feel like that is also a weird one. It's like putting somebody's name in a freezer. If you know, you know, but it's giving the same vibes, and I can't say that I don't stand this. This is like very chaotic behavior, and I low-key love that because this is crazy. This is a little bit out there. I've never put a book in a freezer. I have never put a book in a Ziploc bag, I don't think. I think you won this one. I think you truly outdid everybody. And that is it for today, friends. Those are all of the weird reading habits of yours that I will react to today. Let everyone know down in the comments if you have got any other weird reading habits that you have got so that I can further react to those in the comments. I think that could be quite fun. And if you've got any ideas of what I could react to next that I can ask you guys to pitch in for, let a girl know down in the comments. Maybe I could react to your favorite books or your favorite quotes. I don't know. If you've got any ideas or anything you'd like to see, let a girl know down in the comment section. And if you reach the very end of the video, let us leave the mind blown emoji down in the comments. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already for more content like this. And if you'd like to support the channel further, I always say it, there's a Patreon linked down below. It's the best way beyond the videos to support the channel further, to make sure that things are running smoothly. It helps get new equipment and tech, which you guys know can always be quite pricey, and it just helps run things as smoothly as possible, and you get a bunch of things in return, like live shows and hangouts and cozy game nights and movie nights and a Discord server and different book clubs and behind the scenes content and just a bunch of stuff that I know you guys will really, really enjoy if you do decide to pledge and help the channel just a little bit further. That is linked down below alongside the rest of my socials. I love you guys so much. Thank you for everybody who pitched in for the video. As always, you guys are amazing, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!